Yeah, we tryna shine. Yeah. Let's get with the movement, always steady on the grind. You know we finna make it, yeah, said 100 times. Woo. No one on our level, they ain't putting in the time.
You are listening to the Step Forward and Raise Your Gloves podcast with Randy Brown and Ben McVeigh, where we talk to entrepreneurs, achievers, and overcomers about their businesses and accomplishments and peel back the curtain on challenges faced when achieving anything great. The path will not always be easy. When facing those tough times, the universal signal that you can make that lets the world know that you are willing and able to continue the fight is to step forward and raise your gloves.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ben McVeigh, your co-host for the Step Forward and Raise Your Gloves podcast, where we talk to entrepreneurs, achievers, and overcomers about the journeys in their business as they tell us about how they have stepped forward and raised their gloves in the face of the struggles and challenges they've encountered along the way. As always, alongside me this morning is fellow co-host Randy Brown, founder and CEO of Oak CPA and author of the soon-to-be-released book titled Step Forward and Raise Your Gloves.
Ben, I'm pretty excited today to have this next guest in. This is someone who I've been really impressed with since I met him. He is, at 23 years old, he got into real estate investing while he had a 9-to-5. Now his primary focus is real estate investing. He started with single families. He's moved into the commercial realm, multi-units and things like that. He has developed a pretty impressive portfolio already. And now he focuses a lot of his time on growing that portfolio, bringing value to investors, but also putting together some training for those who are wanting to get into that space. Bringing in today DJ Hume.
Awesome, guys. Hey, I'm pumped to be here. Really excited to be talking to you guys and looking forward to it.
Welcome.
DJ, so I gave a little bit in your intro, a little bit of your background, but why don't you take us a little bit through the path? Like, what were the first things that got you interested in real estate, and then how you dipped your toe in, and now how you're kind of choke slamming the game?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I got my first property when I was 23, but I think real estate investing for me started way before that. Even in college, I started to see people around there. It seemed that everyone that was wealthy, everyone that was doing well and can kind of live life on their own terms, they all had real estate in some capacity. So when I saw that, I realized, hey, I need to get into this investment vehicle in some way. So I started to, at 20 years old, I started learning about real estate. I grabbed some books. I actually took some courses. I was reading blogs. Most importantly, I was trying to absorb as much information from these people that had real estate because I wanted to be educated in this space. I knew it was going to be important. I didn't know what I was going to do, how I was going to do it, but I knew I needed to be educated. So it started when I was 20 years old. I even started walking some properties when I probably had a negative net worth. I had a bunch of student loan debt.
Right.
So, I was trying to play it cool then. But when I came out of school and I finally had a job, although I was only making $35,000 a year, which was barely paying my bills, I knew that I needed to get started. I needed to get started faster, or as fast as I could. So that is when I came across a property at 23 years old. And what helped me was all that education that I did up to those 3 years. When I found a deal, I knew that I wanted that, right? I looked at all these deals and I knew my numbers and I knew that this was a screaming deal that I had to get. So I got it under contract. I think it was an $80,000 house. I put together the math. It went on the MLS at like noon. I'm pretty sure I had it under contract at 3, right? And knew I was like, all right, I need to scrape together like $4,000 because I was going to do an FHA loan. So what helped me was understanding how to finance deals before I even got into this first deal.
Okay.
Right? So that is how I got into my first property, and it wasn't a beautiful property by any means, but it was livable. So my goal with that property was to fix that up over the next 12 months. I was going to use every single dollar from my earned income, fix it up, and then get it ready to be rented. So that's what I did 12 months into that, and then from there, I just started compiling properties, and it's all that momentum. That first property was the hardest to get into, but you start learning as you go. I got a lot of momentum as I was going with that first property after I got that rented. In fact, once I rented that first property, I already had my second property under contract. And then by the time I closed on that property, I had 3 renters that were going to be renting it the next day. So
wow.
I was focused on how I can scale this business and move as fast as I can. So that was really how I got my momentum. And then from that, I've been able to begin to learn other ways of investing, other niches, and it's changed along the way. But that's how I originally got into the game.
Nice. All right. Well, that's pretty cool. It's like I actually heard a couple of things I jotted down here, and I wanted to bring those back out. So you're talking about being in college and all the people you ran into, that could live their life on their own terms. What school did you go to?
I went to a small school called Davenport in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay.
And I went there on a lacrosse scholarship, but also played hockey too.
Okay. All right. So a little bit of a tough guy then, huh?
I don't know about tough guy. I was one of the smallest guys out there.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that.
Right. That's funny. All right. So then you said people who could live life on their own terms. Tell me a little bit about that. What do you mean by live life on your own terms?
I mean, the way I see it is anyone that's working 9 to 5 or anyone that's working for someone else, at the end of the day, you're responsible, to be there on every single day. And I really don't like the fact that you have to call someone or text someone and say, hey, can I go on vacation, right? That doesn't seem like I'm living life on my own terms, right?
Sure.
I want to be able to go where I want, when I want, and do what I want. And that freedom to do what I want, that's when I see that you actually can live life really on your own terms, but live life the way you want to live it.
Wow. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, the other piece of that is when you're working for somebody else, you're working to grow their business. When you're living on your own terms, you're working to grow your own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this meme that goes around. I share it from time to time. I saw it maybe for the first time like 5 years ago. And it was this owner of a business pulls up in front of the shop with a brand new Aventador, Lamborghini. Mm-hmm. And people come out and they're like, man, that's an awesome car, man. Congratulations. That's an awesome car. And the guy says, you know what? Thank you. I really like this car. And if you work hard and you hit your sales numbers and you work diligently for the next year, I can get another one next year.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, obviously, I'm a big believer in working for yourself and having that autonomy and things like that. And I like what you're saying there about the freedom, because it's not for everyone. It's not having a boat off the coast of Miami that's living life on your own terms. It's having the freedom to make the decisions with my time. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
Tim Ferriss talks about that in his book, The 4-Hour Workweek. He's talking about how people have kind of shifted from, the normal idea of what wealth is and how you derive your income. And it really is how much do I have to put in for the return, and finding several places where I can put just a little bit in and get a large return, rather than one place where I put everything in and they give me a check at the end of the week.
Yeah, and my idea of wealth has changed. I originally thought it was about having all this money and be able to buy what I want. But in reality, the more, as I get older, I find that wealth is truly getting more time back. Because as we get older, it's there's more people pulling for our time. And with financial freedom, with the right investments, with tools like that, you start to gain back time, which then allows you to do whatever you want to do with that time.
Right, because you have all this these real estate investments, and you were talking about before the mic went hot. You have all of these, all these properties and all this stuff going on, but you still do consulting on the side just because you have the time to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I look at real estate investing, I think, a little bit different than most people out there. So I got into real estate specifically because, call me lazy, but I didn't want to work, right? I wanted some mailbox money. I wanted money coming on the first of each month. Whereas I see a lot of people that are getting into real estate investing, you're still chasing a check, right? And there's nothing against wholesalers or fix and flips or anything like that. It's a good way to get quick money and a good check, but you're always chasing that next deal. So you get a big fat check, which is great, and then you're like, okay, I need to go get the next one. Mm-hmm. Whereas I'm looking for one big deal right now, and I'm chasing a check for every single month. So I put all my effort into one deal, and then I'm getting infinite returns as long as I hold that property. So it's all about your perspective and how you see it. So that is why I really focus on a buy and hold strategy. I see bigger, the better. The returns are better, but the deals are a lot harder to get into. But if you're willing to put in the work, why not put it into all that work and all that effort into one big deal rather than into all these small deals and try to get these small checks?
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. And so you said you wanted to achieve the living life on your own terms. So you started looking for education, getting yourself educated. I'm sure there were a bunch of places you had to go to get that education, and it wasn't that long ago, but it was long enough ago that the information flow was different then than it is now, right? Mm-hmm. So what kind of places did you go? Like I remember, we're talking 15 years ago. I bought these discs. The Carlton Sheets, remember Carlton Sheets? I don't even know what disc is, man. Right. Yeah, so Carlton Sheets had these late night commercials, right? Mm-hmm. So you're up and you're eating ice cream and things aren't going the way you wanted them to go. And he's actually on the back of a boat talking about, have you ever wanted to invest in real estate? And I was like, right? Yeah. So I bought the disc, and he was talking about all kinds of things. And he got this book about how to make an offer and how to value prices based on rent and all that kind of stuff. So those are discs, right? Going to the library or going to the courthouse and things like that. So what kind of places did you look for your education?
So, I started with books. I'm not much of a reader per se, but I did the Audible that was out. Listen to podcasts is huge for me because I think we have all this free time. So I'll listen to podcasts and listen to what other people are doing just in my free time in the background, and you just kind of get snippets of information. But it also keeps you focused on what your goals are. So podcasts were a big one. Some Audibles or books has been big, but also blogs. Usually if I have a question, rather than just thinking about it, I'm just going to Google it right then and there. I'm going to research it really fast. It takes 5-10 minutes to go read, 5 different articles about that. And then you can get 5 different opinions and then build your own opinion. So Google's been my big piece where I just Google it real fast, see what other people are saying, and then I make my own assessment.
Gotcha. And so now you have some success. You've experienced kind of that, the PhD in the School of Hard Knocks, right? So you've gotten some experience. You've gone to all the places. You've been able to digest, hey, what's good information, what's bad information, and you put together an education course. Or tell us a little bit about that. So what's the mindset behind the DJ Hume Official? What's the what are you trying to accomplish there, or what are you accomplishing, because it's going pretty well, right?
Yeah. So little plug here. So the website's djhumeofficial.com. And the goal behind this is I started a course focused more on beginners, and I want to take them through all the basics from the bare bones, like what are the terms of real estate and all that. I want to take them through the very bare bones of real estate, but then also take them through my first deal, how I looked at the market, how I analyzed that deal, what I did personally, what I was thinking, because I want people to learn from my mistakes, what I did right, what I did wrong, what I would have done differently. And when I can teach people that, my goal is that it took me 3 years to get my first property. I'm hoping I can condense someone else to maybe a year, maybe a month, whatever that is. So, and they can also learn from my mistakes from, I can tell you just from my first couple deals, I made a bunch of mistakes from when I was acquiring properties where I could have been more tax advantageous or done a couple things that probably cost me tens of thousands of dollars at this point. And I would prefer someone doesn't have to make that mistake themselves.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, I love that because you go through the traditional steps of getting your education, right? Going through college and that sort of thing. And you get out and you're like, I'm not sure really what I picked up here, but there's so many avenues to get an education now with the internet and mastermind courses and blogs, like you mentioned. I think it's great you're helping people through the steps, because what a lot of times happens is people don't ever do anything. They don't ever get off their butt because they're afraid of making the mistake and they're not sure the first step to take. So I think that really helps people move forward.
Yeah, and you talked about college, so I'll give you my quick opinion. So college was great, right? I had a lot of fun. I played hockey and lacrosse there, but what it taught me was nothing in the books, but it taught me a great work ethic and to be accountable. Yeah. So if you want to go to college, I think that it's great for some people, but if you're looking to build your own organization, your own company, build financial freedom overall, and live life on your own terms, then I think that college may be able to help you, but I don't think it's going to be able to get you where you need to be. You need a work ethic, and you need to be able to commit and keep yourself accountable. That's what I found across from when I started. I learned a lot about this in college, but to where I am now, I am constantly waking up, and I want to keep myself accountable. I'm telling people what I'm doing so they can help me be accountable. And when you have that people around you that know what you're doing, you're going to be more obligated or be more focused on what your goals are for the future and start working that much closer to them.
Nice. That's a really good point. I mean, accountability is one of the things. Everyone kind of has that their own little level of motivation, right? And having folks that, especially if you pick your circle, right, and the people that you're holding yourself accountable to, they are like-minded individuals. Mm-hmm. So there are people that will, chest you up a little bit when you're slacking, mm-hmm. right? Because you can tell your mom all the time, like, hey, man, I'm going to, or your best friend or whoever. Mm-hmm. And if they're, hey, I'm starting a diet tomorrow, right? Or mm-hmm. I'm going to invest in, 15 properties this year or whatever the case is. Or I'm going to look at 5 properties this week, right? You could tell, you can put those goals out there. But if your network isn't someone or the type of individuals that's going to push back and say, hey, did you hit those 5? Mm-hmm. Like, what happened with those 5? Yep. Tell me about the details of those deals and flush that out. Yeah. So the accountability piece is not just, hey, I want to hold myself accountable, but then when I'm choosing my network of people that I'm going to hold myself accountable to, they have to be strong enough individuals to actually put my feet to the fire.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly
Yeah,
right.
the other thing that does, putting it out there, to everybody that whether it is your mom or your best friend or anything else, you've put it out there, and there's a little bit of an accountability piece to yourself now because you said I'm going to do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
right.
I mean, that's what I've learned is like, if you want a goal, if you have something so big that you want to achieve, just start telling people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before I had any property, I'm like telling people I'm a real estate investor, and they're like, "What kind of property you got?" I'm like, "I'm working on, there's some things going on, right?" So I started saying that I'm a real estate investor, although I didn't have any property. I had the mindset, right? I had other people hearing that I'm a real estate investor. So at some point, I just believed I was one and bought a property.
I like all of that, man. So you also wrote a book?
Yeah, so
Okay.
That was part of the course. It's actually in the course right now. It's the first part of it. I'm looking at actually releasing that. Maybe some of that can get for free. Just read it up, some of the basics about it. But the goal of that is, again, just to learn the basics of real estate investing, some of the basic terms, to just get going and getting something started. And I think that giving back, giving some free content out there just to hear what other people are saying, again, get another perspective, it's a great way to get started.
Right, because there's always 2 sides of every deal, right? So there's the buyer and the seller, okay? And so when you go into any type of negotiation, and I'm not going to say that people are bad intrinsically, but we're all preserving our self-interest, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go to the table, you're negotiating on a property, and you don't have the basic terms down, and you don't understand exactly, you at least would come across as someone that I might be able to nudge a little gravy on this deal, mm-hmm. right? So mm-hmm. I might be able to negotiate with you. So having that foundation of education just makes you a more credible negotiating. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say it's not an adversary, but it's a partner in the deal, right? Mm-hmm. We're moving closer to each other. We're moving back and forth. So the education is huge, mm-hmm. right? And that's with anything. So just having the basic terminology, understanding the different types of real estate investments, because mm-hmm. like what you just mentioned, or you mentioned it earlier, a lot of folks go into wholesaling. A lot of folks, what everyone kind of thinks about is that they're going to flip properties, right? I'm going to buy low, I'm going to put some equity in or some sweat equity into it, and then I'm going to sell high, right? And they see mm-hmm. the big check rather than the incremental check for the rest of their lives,
yep.
right? So, and then people think, well, okay, if I'm going to buy real estate, if I'm going to buy and hold properties, I have to have money up front. Then I either have to borrow money or get a mortgage or do whatever the case is. And there are just other ways to raise that money. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go into any of that a little bit, or is that a little too advanced for the beginner course? Or
there are all kinds of ways to get finance. My advice to anyone that's sitting there and they either want to get into real estate investing, right? You will talk yourself out of doing a deal because you don't have the money. And I see everyone do it. So the reality is, if you are committed to getting into real estate or anything, really anything that you want to do, money shouldn't be a problem, right? If I want to get a deal, for example, if I have no money and I want to do a real estate property, then I'm going to be the person that knows everything about that market, everything about that property, and then I'm going to go pitch this deal to 20 people that have the money and say, hey, I want to give you half this property. You don't have to do anything. I'm going to manage everything. I just want half the ownership, right? So that's one easy way to get into a deal, but you have to be educated. You have to know what you're talking about. And so there's so many ways to get into real estate. That's what makes real estate great, is there's not one path that you have to follow. So that's just one way. There are probably another 10, 15 different funding options that I'm thinking of just the top of my head.
Sure.
And probably another 10, 15 that I haven't even thought about.
Right. So I thank you for doing that. And it wasn't to say, hey, tell me all the ways that we can get finance, right? But a lot of folks will think that anything we've been exposed to is linear. Mm-hmm. So the things that I've been exposed to about a particular industry, those are all the things, right? And then something as common as real estate, because we all live somewhere, we all work somewhere, we all, interact with, we all go shopping somewhere. All of those are real estate interactions. So we feel like we've seen all these types of properties. We know, right? We know. We don't know. Mm-hmm. We don't know. You really have to dig in and realize that it is a very, very deep pool, right? And, we shouldn't be afraid to swim.
Yeah.
Like, we can start with our floaters on, we can get the education, do those kind of things, but eventually, man, rip those things off. Dig into all the exciting ways that you can be in this real estate game. Yep. Because the goal, my opinion, is whether it's real estate or investing in businesses, providing capital, startup capital to businesses, the stock market in stocks that pay a good dividend, any of those kind of things, the way to achieve this living life on your own terms, in my opinion, is to make sure that when you earn whatever you do to scrape together the cash, that you put it to work.
Yep.
Or whatever talent you have to generate cash, that you are maximizing the input of that talent and the return that you get for that input. So, man, I really appreciate you coming in. Now, we do like to try to get a funny story or an interesting insight from folks as they come in.
Yeah.
Do you have a particularly cool story or a funny situation that happened maybe while you were walking properties or maybe you were pitching a deal and something funny happened, right?
So I'll give you two of them.
Okay.
The first, the quick one, right,
Okay.
is my second property. I went and closed on it, and they gave me the keys and everything, and I went to go to the property. Keys didn't work. And I was like, hey, I call them up. I'm like, hey, the keys aren't working. And they're like, no, okay, we'll take care of it. They come over, they drop me off new keys, and they're like, okay, you're good to go. Go back, try these keys. Still don't work. I didn't have keys for my property for like 2.5 weeks. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, does this happen? And then I have my realtor talk about it. He's like, I've never had this happen. No one knew what to do. So I was like, I guess we got to break in. So that was funny with my second property. Now, with my first property, this goes to just kind of the what it takes to get something that you truly want. So when I put an offer on my first property, it may have been like June of, I don't know what year, but put an offer, got accepted. We're going through like the due diligence and everything, and I'm still learning like all that process, and everything's good to go. I actually met the owner, and she was a sweet lady. So we go to the closing table, and I got my check. This is basically all the money that I own. I'm super nervous. I don't know what to do. I'm just relying on all these 8 people in the room that they're not, they got my back. So we go there, and then I start signing stuff, and the seller doesn't show up. And they're like, oh, she must be running late. So they call her. She's not answering. And I'm like, okay, is this normal? And again, everyone's looking at me like, this hasn't happened, but let's just keep going through the process. So I start signing the documents, and she's not answering. And then the selling agent finally gets a hold of her. She's like, yeah, I'm not coming, and I'm not selling. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? They're like, hey, just go through the process. So I'm writing them a check for a property that I'm not going to own today. I have no idea what's going to happen. So we start following up on it, and I call them a week later. They don't know what's going on. I'm like, okay, so what should I do? So I'm like, I guess I'll go like ask an attorney, like, do I have any rights to this?
Sure.
And I go see an attorney maybe 2 weeks later, and they're like, yep. Don't know what to tell you. So no one like knows what to do. And yet they still have all my money. I don't have a property. No one has any advice to me. So this went on for, I think, maybe 5-6 months, where I like kind of have a property but don't have a property.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, okay, I've been asking all these people to help me. No one's giving me advice. No one's been able to like push, like get it there, right? So I was like, all right, I'm taking this into my own hands. So I found where she was living because she wasn't even living in this house at this time. Okay. So we somehow found her new address, and I just write her a handwritten personal letter, basically coming from the heart about, hey, I would really like this property and all this stuff, and a page. And she ended up getting it maybe like a week later. And she calls me and she said, hey, I'm really sorry about all this. I think I'm ready to close. So I'm like, okay, guys, we got her, right? And this is the 23rd of December. So I'm like, all right, guys, we got her. We need to like get this going. And we like get the troops ready, like all the closing agents. We go to her house. They sign the documents, and on the 24th of Christmas, we're like, woo, all right, we got this house. So that is how my first property, how I acquired it. And it wasn't like by the books how it should go. Yeah. It took a lot of effort. So that's what I see, like something like that. Just don't fail or quit just because someone said no. You got to stay consistent with it. You got to do something outside the box sometimes. Sure. Got to go to the next level. That's what helped me get into the game to begin with.
Nice. That's a really cool story. So there was no legal recourse, huh?
No, I mean, not really. I mean,
there might have been, but there was no money in it for the return.
Yeah. They're like, what are you gonna say for it? Like, there's no money.
That's right. Yeah, man, that is crazy. And so then just really boiling down and saying, hey, handwritten note and Christmas times, tugging on them heartstrings. Let's get this thing going.
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah, but it's the continuous pressure, though, right? A lot of people would have been turned away. They would have just said, it would have been a story they were telling forever. Like, I tried to get into real estate, and this is what happened on my first deal, and it's a racket, and this never happens. And there's something screwy that happens all the time. I had an investor, you may know this person, who the day of closing, they go over there to do a final walkthrough because this was a fix and flip. It was raining, basement full of water. Day of close. It's like things happen. Yep. Yeah, he said, there's never been a drop of water in that basement. I haven't even spilled a cup of water in that basement ever. And then the day of close, there's water in the basement. Now, actually, the deal's still closed, because the buyer, like you said, was looking at the numbers and said, hey, this is a great investment piece for me. So, even though the basement is wet, we still want to find a way to work this deal. So they did.
Yeah, the best plan is to have a plan A, B, C, and D. So know that it's probably A and B probably aren't going to work out, but know like what's your next step and have a plan behind the plan.
So obviously, that's great. That's great. Obviously, you know what you're talking about. You've got experience. And if people want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you again?
So probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is you can find me on Instagram. It's djhumeofficial.com. You can also check us out on Facebook. It's just DJ Hume. I'm always trying to post content to help other people get into real estate, learn from me, learn what I'm doing, and I'm always trying to interact and network with other like-minded people that want to get into real estate or need help with their business. At the end of the day, my goal is to give back. The more I can give back, I see that I get a return in that. So I'm looking to build a bigger network of people that are like-minded so we can help each other together.
Nice. All right, man. So the name of the podcast, Step Forward and Raise Your Gloves, right? The universal signal that we can give that lets the world know we're ready and able to continue to fight. Step forward, raise your gloves. In business, things do not always go the way that we think they will, right? Sometimes we find ourselves in situations through no fault of our own, or maybe it is a fault of our own, right? Maybe it is our fault that we got here. But we find ourselves in situations where it feels like the world is against us. Do you have a story like that? Maybe something you can share with some of our listeners about a time where you were really up against it and you had to step forward and raise your gloves through that situation?
Sure, man. So we'll stick with like the real estate story, right? Sure. So as I started, I was in single families, and I started accumulating these properties. I probably had like 5 or 6 single families at this point. And I'm like now shifting into multifamilies, commercial, and I'm doing a bunch of learning about it, figuring out. And I'm thinking like, hey man, I got these properties. I'm the man. I know what I'm doing, right? So I get into my first deal of a commercial apartment complex. It was an 8-unit here in Cincinnati, and get it under contract. We start going through the process, and if you're not familiar with real estate, residential versus commercial, they're completely different processes altogether. So it was all new to me. And we start going through like the underwriting process to get financing and everything like that. And I'm lining up investors to partner with me. So the stars align where I get financing with investors and they're in on the deal. And then I start getting funding. And then I actually go in and I have to pay like $2,000 to get an appraisal. And we're bumping up to like a week and a half to when we close. And I'm still waiting on this appraisal. And then we just get it back. I've paid $2,000. The appraisal's good. And then the bank calls me and says, hey, we're not interested. 2 weeks left before we close.
Oh,
And I'm like, I don't know what to do. All right. I was like, so I could have just like stopped there and been like, hey, it's not meant to be. Hey, this is all falling apart. Oh, by the way, I also had an investor drop out because they didn't feel confident now that this bank was
bank wouldn't
out.
back it, sure.
Yeah, so they're like getting cold feet. So now I have to like step up. I have to get my investors back on board. So I still ended up losing one, but I now just had 3 with me. They were convinced that it was a good deal, and I was like, hey, don't worry about the financing. I'm going to take care of it. So then I went to bank after bank, found partners, and I ended up finding another bank that would actually finance the deal. I had to get an extension and convince the seller to extend another 30 days, and I ended up getting closed on that property. But moral of the story is I could have just stopped right after that, called it quits and said, hey, maybe a year from now it might be a better time. But I stepped up, got our investors back on board, found other people that could help us fund this deal, and then we ended up closing on it, and now that property has been killing it for us. I love that property, so that is just that's what it takes. You got to really step up. Things are going to go the way that you want them to. You can either sit back or you can just get after it and go to work.
Nice. So, man, I want to jump right out and go to djhumeofficial.com and get some of this information. That's 2 stories you told on deals where literally 70% of the population don't get those deals closed, man. And I'm talking about 70% of not just the population at large. Yeah. I'm talking about 70% of investors don't take those steps, man. Yeah. That's good stuff. Yeah. That is the type of mentor you want to learn from, is someone who is willing to get through. Guy we used to work for, Rick Browning, used to talk about tenacity. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is. You see a deal, you know that it's the deal that you want, and you stay after it just like a pit bull on a ham bone. Right. That's good stuff, man. I appreciate that story.
Going back to another one of our guests.
Nobleman
and the cottage ham bone.
That's right. Nice shout out. So we'll be referencing this one down the road too, man. You killed it today, man. I appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely, man.
Thanks,
appreciate
DJ.
having me.
You've just listened to the Step Forward and Raise Your Gloves podcast, hosted by Randy Brown and Ben McVeigh. Conversations with entrepreneurs, achievers, and overcomers. Catch all of our episodes on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or visit us at www.stepforwardraiseyourgloves.com. We'll see you next time.